fact, let's start with one right now. Dave, why don't you start? Give me one of the three bust-proof players that you would like to talk about.
Let's start with Jalen Hurts, because I think that I think that people have come around on him being a top 3 quarterback. There are some who believe that he is the #1 quarterback in fantasy. And I can't say that that's a wrong opinion at all. We know what he's capable of doing with his arm. We know what he's capable of doing with his feet. We know that he's got an amazing receiving core, great offensive line. Here are some things that might be a little bit different for him in 2023. Number one, as of now, I think the Eagles defense is still going to be very, very good. One of the top 3 DSTs in the league. In fact, they are my #1 DST, but they're going to be younger than they were last year. And I can't help but think that maybe they bend just a little bit more than 2022 Philadelphia defense did. If that's the case, we're looking at more competitive games for Jalen Hurts, which means he's not going to be handing off in the fourth quarter. He's not going to be taking a passive approach. He will be in the thick of it, and he will be putting up some fantasy points that way. The other thing that's different in 2023 is that Miles Sanders is gone. And Sanders, for whatever it's worth, did score double-digit touchdowns last year. If he's gone, are we counting on DeAndre Swift or Rashad Penny or Kenneth Gainwell, and maybe even as a trios tag team to replace those touchdowns? I'm not sure that they will. So we might see even more touchdowns from Jalen Hurts in 2023 on the ground. And we already know that he's doing a lot through there. In fact, he averaged 17.9 fantasy points per game on his passing alone last year. So even if he doesn't run for more touchdowns and he doesn't run as much as before, okay, he's not hitting that 30-point ceiling that we'd love to see him get. And some weeks that 30-point ceiling is more like a 40-point ceiling. Okay, fine. He still should be in the range of 24, 25 fantasy points per week. You're expecting more than that, but I don't think that means that he's a bust if that's what he's averaging this year. Bottom line is this: short of him getting hurt, I don't see him regressing as a passer. I think he does more from week to week, and I think he takes on even more of a role in the run game, given the changes to the running backs in Philadelphia. Bust-proof quarterback, the most bust-proof quarterback.
Ooh.
That might be why he's QB1 in fantasy football this year.
Okay, Dan, you have to make the argument that he's actually not bust-proof, that Jalen Hurts is not bust-proof. Also, I think more interesting is what Dave said at the very end there, that he's the most bust-proof. So I think when you compare to Allen and Mahomes, I'm interested to see why Dave went that route. But what do you have to say, Dan?
Listen, this is probably the hardest anti-case to make on the show, I think, of all the 6 players that Dave and I picked for today, personally. So it's going to be tough to do the devil's advocate here. I'm going to try to do the devil's advocate because I really don't feel, at this point, with what I saw from my film evaluation of Hurts, I don't feel like there's much room for regression. He improved so much as an anticipatory thrower last year that, and using outside the numbers throws, where what I mean by that is the 2 numbers on the football field, throwing the ball outside of those, not inside, the harder throws to make. Right. That it's really tough for me to make this case. The only case I might make is hit this one. One, Jalen Hurts lost his play caller from last year and his offensive coordinator, or sorry, not his play caller, but his offensive coordinator from last year. Maybe that is something that can play a role in a little bit of regression there. Maybe, maybe not. I'll also make the case that he does have A.J. Brown on his roster as his wide receiver 1, someone who's dealt with bad knee injuries in the past that have debilitated him. Dallas Goedert's missed time with injuries. There's some injury profile in that receiver course. Of course, now they have the backup options, and they also have Devontae Smith. So it's not like he would lose all of his weapons, even if 1 or 2 went down. So in finding the case against Jalen Hurts, it's really difficult with his rushing floor. I'm kind of struggling in the moment here. I debated this before the show, like what case could I make? The only case I really have is him regressing as a passer by losing his offensive coordinator. And there is still sometimes you watch him and you're like, okay, is this really one of the elite passers in the game? But there are other times you watch him and you're like, yeah, this guy's making anticipatory throws, which probably only a handful or fewer of quarterbacks are even making in the NFL on a consistent basis. So I don't know. This is not a good case, Adam. I apologize, but I can't do it because I love Jalen Hurts. And I think, Dave, the real case is, can you take Jalen Hurts over Mahomes as the QB1? Like, is there a case to be made as him as QB1? I think is the opposite side of this. So, yeah, just proves that he's bust-proof.
Why is he the most bust-proof quarterback, Dave, ahead less bust potential, more bust-proof than Mahomes and Allen?
I know I like his receiving core better than what Mahomes and Josh Allen are dealing with. And listen, I can't split hairs too much here between Mahomes and Allen And maybe the lesson is to just simply just target whoever's third. And you don't have to be the first guy to take a quarterback in your draft or in your auction, but that third guy, whoever it is, this is the elite tier of quarterbacks. Go after the third guy, the third man.
I don't think you can do that, Dave.
Why not?
Because they all go in the same round.
Well, it's obviously easier in an auction than it is in a regular draft. But if you're, where would you have to be picking where you can feel comfortable getting the third guy? Probably with a top 5 pick. If you're picking 5th overall, you will probably have a pick of at least one of them by the time you're up in 1-2. And that's in a home league. In an analyst league, you might have a shot at all 3 of them being there. And listen, Jalen Hurts, number 3 in fantasy points per game last year. I think he can take a statistical jump based on how he throws the ball and the uptick in running and the more production. He was only 1.243 fantasy points per game less than Patrick Mahomes at number 1. So he could catch Mahomes. We know that Mahomes doesn't have Juju. They replaced him with a rookie. What if the wide receivers in Kansas City, not the tight end, the wide receivers just don't hold up their end of the bargain? Sky Moore doesn't progress. Kadarius Toney underwhelms, et cetera, et cetera. I think that that's something that could hurt Mahomes and keep him from throwing for 5,000 yards. And Jalen Hurts ends up catching him because of what he does on the ground and through the air.
Yep. And you know what? Hurts was really close because he scored 8.5 fantasy points in week 18. And he was not healthy, not even close in week 18. So remember, he came back because they needed to win that game. They lost their previous 2 games. They needed to win that game to lock up the 1 seed. That was only the 2nd game all year in which Hurts scored fewer than 20 fantasy points in 6-point per passing touchdown league. So it's a total outlier. He was super close to Patrick Mahomes, and he was actually better than Josh Allen before his shoulder injury. Bust case I would make against Hurts is did lose his offensive coordinator, as Dan said, has a 35-year-old center in Jason Kelsey, has a 33-year-old right tackle in Lane Johnson, lost one of the starting guards in Isaac Seumalo to the Steelers. So it's kind of a team that was so damn good last year. They are a little bit old up front on both sides of the ball. Maybe that could go wrong, but hard.
And one thing I didn't mention that is worth noting is the schedule is complete. It's like flipped for the NFC East teams, Eagles included. Last year, the Eagles and the NFC East had the AFC South, which is easiest division probably for fantasy. Now that's going to be the AFC East. You got the Bills defense, the Jets defense, Patriots defense, nothing to scoff at. Dolphins defense with Vic Fangio coming in to right the ship there, and the West in the NFC. So you're dealing with better defenses there as well. So I do feel like it's a little bit of a different situation there, at least from a schedule standpoint.
You're right. Actually, Jalen Hurts scored 30+ fantasy points against the Giants, against Washington. So he'll face them again, 1 each. But he also did that against Minnesota, Chicago, Tennessee, 3 of the easiest matchups last year, plus Green Bay and Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, when they didn't have TJ Watt, they were awful. I think that's when he played them. Okay.
Are you interested in knowing what the PSOS score is for Philadelphia this year?
Yes.
It's 26. It's low. Remember, the higher the number, the worse it is.
Strength of schedule?
Projected strength of schedule. So this is a different metric than the strength of schedule that you'll find in your outdated newspaper or on a basic website. This is something that takes into effect a grading of every defense based on their personnel, their scheme, and their coaching, and their quality depth, all put into one easy ranking, basically.
And while we're at it, Dave, tell the listeners where they can find this in depth.
The initial place where you'll find the projected strength of schedule story is going to be in our magazine, our Fantasy Football Preview magazine. Yes, that's right. After I just made fun of print publication, I'm now going to promote our print publication, the Fantasy Football Today Preview magazine. There's only one. It's going to be on newsstands everywhere. It's going to be dropped off at your house if you I think if we're selling on Amazon again. I don't know these things. I'm half making it up, but we will have updated versions and a link to the updated versions that you can just simply type into your browser once you find it in the magazine. And so if things change, if one of the division rivals basically for the Eagles loses a player to, an injury before the season starts, that'll affect that ranking and it'll make it easier on Jalen Hurts.
All right,
and
let's
just gonna give one teaser real quick, Adam.
I don't get to a new player yet. We're 12 minutes in. We're
okay, go to the new player. No teasers.
All right,
no teasers.
All right, listen. Let's get to Dan.
Trying to sell things here, Adam.
We sold it. All right.
Hey, I got one more thing.
No. Who do you want to talk about, Dan?
Hold on. The Eagles' projected strength of schedule last year, this is last year's magazine, was second. So they had the second easiest projected schedule, and it showed in the numbers.
All right. Dan, bust-proof player, number 1 for you.
Yeah, I'm going to start off with Joe Burrow, quarterback Bengals. So for me with Burrow, it's really just comes down to a few things. I'll start with the number 1 thing from a schematic standpoint. He's gone through that period we saw briefly with Mahomes and then briefly, I thought, with Burrow, where defenses are playing 2 high shells against him, basically just saying, we're trying to take everything away from you big play wise, see what you can do to beat us. And he beat that. And he's now mastered that style of defense. And once that happens and the coordinators can no longer just run 2 high safeties, take away the big plays, there's not really many avenues to beat these quarterbacks. We've seen it with Mahomes, and now we've seen it with Joe Burrow. The connection with Burrow and Jamar Chase is just too good at this point. They threw 1,000 balls together before their final season at LSU and thousands of more since. They know exactly where they're going to be, and they can beat any defense right now. And you add to that the mastery just from a processing standpoint with Burrow to what the Bengals have done to build around him. And there's just things I like. So first of all, coming into this season, they add Orlando Brown Jr., who I think will shore up their left tackle position. And that's been a big problem for them. Jonah Williams was not the player they hoped he would be when they drafted him in the first round at Alabama. For now, he's penciled in at right tackle, but eventually La'el Collins will come back and play that position. They'll have 2 bookend tackles. They also have some depth now on the interior offensive line, although they also have really good starters there as well. So I really like what's going on in the offensive line, what they added there. At receiver, I also like what they've added as well. 2 players in this draft I love. Charlie Jones, I talked about him out of Purdue a lot. He's a perfect fit for that Bengals system. He's going to be at some point what Tyler Boyd gave them, and he for now provides insurance for them if Boyd goes down. As well as Andre, I never know how to pronounce this guy's name, the Princeton kid, who, when you watch him, Andre Iosivas, I think is how you pronounce the name. And when you watch him, you get little shades. It's not him, but you get little shades of Christian Watson, just a little bit. That same type of profile, long athlete with breakaway speed. Now he's breaking away against defenses that Princeton is facing. So you got to keep that in context, but an interesting athlete to add to the mix there. In addition, obviously bringing back Boyd, Higgins, and Jamar Chase. You look at the numbers, thanks to Adam on this one, but in the games where both Chase and Higgins played, Burrow was as good on a points per game basis, nearly as good as Mahomes and Josh Allen last season. You can hopefully assume that you're going to get a little bit better luck on the injury front with Higgins. It's possible. I don't know. Chase also obviously missed some time last year. If both play this year, that's a different scenario there. And I even like the addition of Irv Smith as well to the mix here. I think Irv Smith, obviously, very talented player, didn't work out in Minnesota, a lot of injuries there, but we've seen at times so many easy layup options for the tight end in this offense when no one else is accounting for the tight end because of all the other weapons. So I just look around and I love the offensive line and the depth there. I love the receivers and the depth there. And I just love what Burrow showed last season as far as beating defenses that are just going to play 2 high shells. I don't know how you beat Burrow at this point. So I don't see any real room for him to regress.
Dave, would you like to make the bust case again? The bust case for Joe Burrow here.
Well, first of all, it's Yoshivas. I know it looks like Iosivas, but it's Yoshivas for.
And you know what? I knew that, and I screwed it up anyway.
It's okay. It's what I'm here for. Now everybody will know how to say the name of a guy who's not going to make any plays for the Cincinnati Bengals this year.
Right.
Okay. So I think
your argument.
That's it. I'm done. No Yoshivas. Burrow's going to stink. Okay. First of all, I know that we're implying that obviously a player getting hurt is not going to be something that we can argue for why a player is not bust proof.
Right.
So I'm not going to say that Burrow could tear his ACL again, but I do want to mention that there were 1, 2, 3, 4 games. Here we go, Adam. We're going to talk about the same thing we talked about earlier this week. There were 4 games last year where Jamar Chase did not play. In those 4 games, Burrow was over 21 point. He had more than 22 fantasy points, 6-point per passing touchdown leagues, 1 time in those 4 games. There were 3 other games, Adam, where T. Higgins either barely played. That's what it is. He played 1 snap in the other game. In those 3 games, 22.2, 19.3, and 20.6. This just means that Burrow is mortal. It means that he cannot put the team on his back, Mahomes style, Jalen Hurts style, maybe some of the other quarterbacks who can run and just put a bunch of fantasy points on the board anyway. He needs his star receivers, and he needs both of them. If he loses one of them, he can still be good, But if he's going to average around 21 fantasy points per game, I don't know if I want that as my, I don't know if I'll feel good about that if I'm drafting him as my QB4. Now, we don't know that that's going to happen. That's kind of in the same vein as saying, well, this guy could get hurt and then he's a bust. But short of that, I don't know if there's a case to make against Burrow. He's a phenomenal thrower. Defenses are going to have a real hard time with him if they keep doing what they've been doing defensively. And they've adapted to. First, he was struggling against cover 2. They found a way to beat that. Then teams went to cover 1, cover 3. He beats that too. I don't know what defenses are going to do when this offense is healthy and with better protection. I think Burrow is a very safe fantasy quarterback who's worthy of being the 4th QB off the board.